Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Men for Life podcast. I'm Sean Corcoran, the CEO of Men for Life, and today I'm very excited to be joined by Brandy Meeks, the president of the Vitae Foundation. The Vitae Foundation is a pro-life research organization. How are you today, Brandy?
Doing well. Thanks for having me. Excited about this.
I'm excited too. We did try this yesterday. I'll let everybody know. And we tried to jam as much as we possibly could into about 20 minutes and realized that both of us were talking so fast that it was not going to come across well to anybody but us.
It was
So we're
like those Micro Machines commercial. Anybody remember that? Like a throwback, like where you're trying to throw in all the things. Like we
That's right.
probably could have scored a pretty big deal had we been born in a little bit earlier generation.
Yeah, I think we're both very good at speaking fast because it came across clear. I just think it was trying to get too much information in too short of a time.
Well, you're an attorney, so you're natural at that, right? Like that's what you're supposed to do is like put in all those disclaimers at the end. I don't know what my excuse is. I'm a mom.
Yeah, and a grandmother,
That's right, and a grandma.
which
Yes.
which I love to point out because it helps me to remember that I am also old enough to be a grandfather. I just waited a really long time, and it was the perfect time. I'm so glad.
That's right. That's
All
right.
right, so Brandy, if you don't mind, just kind of giving a background of yourself and how you got to where you are today, and what the Vitae Foundation is, because it's a unique type of research, and I think it's important to point that out instead of people thinking, this is just data.
Yeah, I would love to do that because essentially our data tells a story. So we'll definitely get to that. Um, Again, I'm the CEO and president of Vitae Foundation. I started out in the pro-life movement as a pregnancy center director up north of Kansas City. So pregnancy centers definitely have my heart. That's where I got my start. And then I went to work for Vitae Foundation as the director of marketing and research application for a few years, and was able to use the research to be able to help more pregnancy centers find and connect with abortion minded women. So, women that are actively searching for abortion as an option because they feel like they don't have any other option when they're experiencing an unexpected pregnancy. And then I was called by Abby Johnson to go work for her to help rescue abortion workers from the abortion industry. And that really allowed me to see things from a different perspective. And it was a beautiful chance even to use emotional research there that I had learned at Vitae to be able to help them connect with the hope and healing that they were looking for as they were working within the abortion industry. It was interesting because the months of November and December were some of the highest yielding months to pull abortion workers out of the abortion industry. And part of that is because they wanted to connect with joy and peace because those are the things that Christmas is all about. And they hadn't
Yeah.
experienced that for so long, but that is the carrot to wave in front of somebody's face to pull them out of the darkness that they were experiencing there. So again, it's about emotions. And then that led me back to Vitae Foundation. After Roe was overturned, the board reached out and asked me if I would come back and lead. And so I've been here about 3 years now, about 3.5 years. And our research is different than surveys and polling. Those are great tools. Those tell you on the other side of things why people maybe voted a certain way or how they voted or what they feel about certain decisions that they've made, but it doesn't tell you the why. And so the why is actually discovered through emotional research. And we've been working over 30 years now with the why. So, understanding why people make the decisions that they do. We do that through emotional research. We've also done it what's called right brain research with Dr. Charles Kinney. He's done work for Fortune 500 companies like Harley Davidson and GM. He was actually the guy that said, don't stop selling the Corvette. People are connected to that. Older men, once they finally have the money to be able to invest in that, want to feel the freedom of being able to drive this car. And really, you can see that that's stuck, right? He's
Yeah.
also the guy that helped create the dollar menu for McDonald's, the value menu. I'm sorry, rather. So he helped them discover like how you package things together and how people want the convenience of it. And so when we went to him, we said, okay, how can we work together to figure out how to sell life to people? And so through right brain research, we do emotional interviews individually with the people that we are trying to understand better. So we've done a lot of work with women, we've done a lot of work with the general public. But recently, we did a study exclusively on men. And that's the first study of this kind that's been done that is determined to find out exactly why men do the things they do when they find themselves in an unexpected pregnancy and say the things that they say, and how we can reach them with a message that gives them the tools to empower them and equip them to step into their roles as fathers. And we just named it. It's called A Few Good Men. And because, we're looking for a few good men, but we need a lot of them, right, to step into their roles as fathers. So we can cover that more in just a little bit, but that's kind of an overview of the work that we do.
I love that. So when you say A Few Good Men, it makes me think about the scene about the truth, right? You can't handle the truth.
Can't handle the
And
truth, right?
that's
Yeah.
right. And, in what Colonel Jessup is saying is, and I don't have it memorized, but what he's saying is, you sleep in peace, right? And you get to sleep in peace. You get the honor of being able to do that, the ability to do that because of the work that we are doing, watching over you, right? And when you brought up the title "A Few Good Men" yesterday when we talked, it made me think of that, because that really is a characteristic of men, right? To watch over, to protect, to provide, and that's something that is missing in many cases in our society today, for many reasons that we'll probably touch on a couple of them. But I think it's great to kind of draw that comparison and bring that idea back, because the protecting and providing was something that you found a lot in the research, right?
That's right. Well, and even what led us to this is that our last study on abortion healing, where we sat down with women to understand how to get them into healing sooner, because there are a lot of women that are out there that are suffering, that are unhealed, that are having tumultuous relationships, and are suffering from a lot of PTSD type symptoms, or are repeating abortions over and over again because they haven't had any kind of healing. Well, when we went to them and we were working with them, one of the things that came out of that study is that when they told their partners that they were pregnant, they were looking for support. And whenever a man responded to them and said, "I will support you no matter what you choose," even pro-choice women from that study said they resented that, because they just felt like you took all the responsibility and put it on their shoulders, so that
Right.
they have to make the decision on their own. They have to own the consequences on their own. And that's also many reasons why they don't necessarily seek healing, because they almost take it on their shoulders as if this is all me, and I can't look to anyone else to help me through this. And so that sent off kind of a light bulb moment for us as we were looking to do the next study, because we had a lot of pregnancy centers that were asking us, how can we reach men? We had some personal experiences that we were all going through that had us trying to figure out, like, what is God trying to tell us about men, and are they the missing piece of this equation? And so when we look back at that study to see how women were felt like that message that they were receiving was missing what they were looking for, we thought, well, why is that? What is happening there? So we went and talked with the men to understand more about that statement, "I will support you no matter what you choose." And what we found out is men are conditioned by society to say that. They feel like that is the compassionate thing to say. They feel like one of our themes that came out of this research actually said that they didn't want the confrontation. They didn't want to rock the boat. They felt like the best thing they could do is just say, "I'll support you no matter what you choose," and basically distance themselves from the issue. They did this, Sean, even if they wanted their child. Well, what
So it's
happened?
fear, right?
Absolutely. It's fear. It's fear for about a number of things. And what we find out when we do this research is that sometimes there's things that we discover that we already know, right? Because we're working in it day in and day out. So we understand that fear obviously is a piece of the decision within women and men, right? Like they're scared to take on the responsibility. All of that makes sense because, we see that, we experience that all the time. But also what this research does is tell us, okay, you're right, you're onto something, now fix it, right? How do you overcome it? So yes, they absolutely are fearful, but the bigger problem that was illuminated is that men think they're saying the right thing. And one, actually, not just one, there were a few men that actually, the statement they said, well, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't, right? Feeling like if I say something to try to say, like, yes, I want this child, I'm like a narcissist and I'm controlling and it's toxic masculinity, right? And if I don't, she's upset about that too. But that's just because that's what society has told us that we're supposed to say. That's what we've been conditioned to think is the compassionate thing to say. But I want all of us to pause for a minute and recognize that I'll support you no matter what you choose has been branded into our heads. In fact, many of us probably know the words I'm going to say even before I say them because you can hear them in your head because we've all been told that that's the compassionate thing to say. So if we think that through a little bit more and we stretch our thinking, we recognize that real compassion looks like it can be as high level as, I'm not sure what this looks like, but I'll help you be the best mom possible, and I'll be the best dad possible, and we'll figure this out together. It can also look like, from a friend perspective, I will help you while you finish college. I'll help babysit. I will help you find a local pregnancy center that can help you find the medical care that you need and the diapers that you need and the support that you need. That's what real compassion looks like. So that was one of the things that came out of the study that is prompting us and reminding us that we have a big job to do because culture has conditioned us to think one way. And in some ways, I can't blame young men for this thinking. This is just what's been drilled into their heads. Like the young men said, damned if you do, damned if you don't. They feel like they're in a losing situation. But we do have to do better. And that's what some of the other themes came out of the study too, because we have stripped men of their masculinity, right? And we can talk more about that. If we can restore masculinity, then we can restore them being able to be courageous and not just say the right things, but do the right things. It's more than just words, right?
Right.
It's more than words.
100%. And so, you're speaking my language when you talk about restoring masculinity, and then the courage. That was actually going to be my next question. If fear is what's holding them back, and I want to be clear when I asked about the fear, and I think this was part of your answer was yes, but what I was really referring to was fear of that confrontation, right?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
everybody has fear when a baby's coming. Even when the baby's playing. I mean, my oldest is 10, my youngest is 6, and I still have fear every day about whether or not I'm going to screw them up. And I'm gonna reframe that, because it's really a fear of how bad am I going to screw them up, right? And am I going to equip them to be able to be resilient enough to overcome however bad I screw them up, because I am an imperfect man. But if fear of having that solid conversation, especially in the case where men want to have the child on their own accord without even having that conversation, they know what they want, right? And they want this baby to come, but they're fearful of that confrontation. Then is it fair to say that the purpose of this study is to find the messaging to give them that courage?
Absolutely. And also to recognize where their fears lie. Like, what is their fear tied to? Is it because they're not ready? Which is actually one of the things that popped out pretty clearly from this study is this lack of readiness. I mean, they said it over and over again. I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready. Okay, how do we help them get ready? What kind of mindset do we need to do to equip them to understand that there will be no perfect timing, right? There will
Right.
be no perfect situation. Like, perfection doesn't exist this side of heaven, right? But we live in this society where it's like it is a society of perfection, and um, people have been sold this bill of goods, right? Especially with social media, right? Everything looks so perfect. Everything's with filters on it. Everyone looks like they have it all together. And so being able to recognize that that is one of their biggest fears, and you just expressed it, right? Like, I don't know that I'm ready in some ways, right, to make sure that I'm doing it right, or that I'm giving them what they need. But that secondary piece too is that they need presence. And so if we can, and actually they expressed how much they needed presence, somebody who was present, responsible, and of good character. So in many ways, we can overcome that fear with that lack of readiness to help them understand that really what they need to be able to give their child is the same thing that they're looking for as well, which is just presence, right? Even if you don't have it all together, just being there is enough. Just being there and trying to do what you can to model, even being better than the day before is really what these young people are looking for. And so we need to understand what their fears are, and then not just craft messaging, but craft strategy to help equip and empower them to know that they can choose the courage to just be present.
Yeah. And is it, and I, serving on the advisory board for this study, I did have an opportunity to come and observe a couple of days of research. And, the answers that these men gave, especially to the answer or to the question of how would you define masculinity, right? Were very consistent in what I observed. They understood what a man was supposed to be, right? And in many cases, with the men that I observed, they came from homes where that didn't exist, where there wasn't a male role model, where there wasn't a good male role model, and so it's almost as though they learned the definition of what it means to be a man, of what authentic masculinity is. And I just want to clarify, anytime I talk about masculinity, that I am not talking about anything that people like Andrew Tate or Dan Bilzerian or any of those guys are trying to sell, that self-serving masculinity that, do for yourself as much as you can, and then people will like you. Like, it's just all a bunch of BS, but I'm
Right.
talking about authentic masculinity. And these guys had pretty solid and consistent definitions coming from a place where they didn't have that role model. It's almost like they saw, this is what I missed, therefore that is who I want to be, right? And
Yep.
a part of that was presence, correct?
Right. Exactly. And and again, they were echoing that over and over again. You can see. I mean, we have a fatherhood crisis in this country. We know it, right? We hear about it. We hear those words all the time. But I really do think that that fatherhood crisis is stems from the fact that men have been stripped of their masculinity here in this culture, because we have had some of the movements that we have had to try to make it seem like men and women are in competition with each other. And this is usually where I get on my soapbox for a minute, so I apologize about that. But
Do it.
um, men and women were never meant to be in competition, right? We were always made to be complementary. That is the whole point. And so, since this has happened, men have felt like, well, they don't have a say on certain issues, and they're supposed to sit down and just be quiet and be passive. When in all reality, men were wired to be protectors, right? Men were wired
Yes.
to be protectors. Women are wired to be nurturers. There is nothing wrong with that. It certainly does not mean that women are not strong and that we can't lead. Hello, right? I'm leading a team of 30 people in Jefferson City, Missouri, where we're doing national work and even some international work. It doesn't mean that women can't lead well. It just means we lead differently. And
Yes.
that is okay. And as a strong woman, I'm just here saying, men, as you're watching this, please understand and hear my heart. We need you to protect us. And we certainly need you to protect our children. And there have been a lot of times where men have been on the fence on this issue, and they will say things like, I personally wouldn't choose abortion, but I don't want to make that decision for someone else. And I'm just telling you, we do need you to help protect us and our children. We need you to not take a stand on the fence, right? Riding the fence on this issue. We need you to come out of the gray and truly help us as we are walking this out together, because that's how we were designed.
Yes, 100%. And I mentioned to you yesterday that many times when I talk about masculinity, and look, just like men have been conditioned for 53 years or generations to stay silent on this issue or to only say whatever you want to do, whatever you choose, your body, your choice, whatever. I do think there is a more recent type of conditioning that has come from neo-feminism and people like Andrew Tate, right? This what I will call toxic masculinity. Toxic masculinity exists,
Call it what it
and
is.
and, and
Call
that's
it what
fine.
it is. Yep.
But not all masculinity is toxic is the issue.
That's
And
right.
so coming from that, anytime I talk about masculinity, I will inevitably get several comments from people telling me about how I am somebody who wants to oppress women and just keep them pregnant and barefoot in the kitchen, and that like they are my chef slaves, I guess. I don't know. And you
They would
know,
really have trouble with me because I do like to cook. But
but the reality is that my wife, who is the strongest woman I know, is she is a dentist in her own right. She has her own practice. She's had it for 15 years. She has a dozen employees. She's run this practice through multiple hurricanes and through COVID, and a 500-year flood. She lost one office to hurricanes, almost lost her second office to a flood, and then there was a freeze. Like, it was insane, and just continued to go and go and go. She's very strong, and I support her in everything that she does. And so it's not about domination, and that's where we get into this idea that neo-feminists and toxic masculinists, I may have just made up that word,
I love it.
have have gotten us to this point. And I think that it's important to make a distinction, because that's not what you're talking about. That's not what I'm talking about. When we talk about protect, it's not about like put me in a cage and and go out and make sure that nobody ever comes and finds the cage, right? Or it's about, hey, protection is more than just physical, right? It's emotional, it's spiritual. And so there's so many aspects that go to that, and that is where men can thrive. And I was listening to a great podcast today, and I think you'll really enjoy it. I'll send it to you later. But it, the guy who was talking, and I cannot remember his name right now, but the guest was talking about how when he gives talks, he will say things like, um, he will talk about how society as a whole, and this may just be central to America, society as a whole has really focused on equality for women, right? And because of that, what we have been able to show is that women thrive in an educational scenario. They thrive in many professions. They thrive in they can be amazing doctors. Maybe even better doctors than men. And when he says that, the audience will just roar and clapping. And then if he says um, men can thrive in other areas, like it's just silence, because it's almost like you can't talk about men excelling without getting this point where women are being defeated,
Mm,
and so that's a long tangent to get into, but it's just a point to where our society has come when the conversation of masculinity, and to really contrast that toxic stuff is not what you're talking about, and it's not what I'm talking about. But strong women deserve strong men standing beside them,
absolutely.
leading alongside them.
Right beside each other, right? Like that's really what this is about, is like being able to lean into each other. And what the example you just gave me actually reminded me of something that I experienced a couple weeks ago. I was speaking at a Young Catholic Professionals chapter meeting in Denver, and I think we have this window of opportunity with young people right now in the most beautiful way possible. So I really want to give some hope, because lots of times, we sit here and we talk about all the things that we're facing, and sometimes it can seem overwhelming. But the hopeful thing that I'm seeing right now with the masculinity piece is that, as I was sharing what I just shared with you about the men and women were meant to be complementary and all of that, I saw it was a room full of young people, and I saw the young men like light up, and they straightened up in their chairs, and they were just like glued to what I was saying, hanging on to every word. And I realized that they feel so inspired by this. And it's probably part of it is because I'm a strong woman up here basically telling them, like, we need you, right? Like, I'm giving you permission as a strong woman for strong women everywhere to tell you, I recognize this and we want to make this right. But what was even more interesting wasn't the response of the young men. I kind of thought that would happen. It was this response of the young women. And I have seen this happen before, but I was in Denver and I wasn't really sure what kind of response I was going to get there. And I
Yeah.
saw these young women lean in the same way. And many of them were like clapping along, like even just silent cheers, like sweeping across them, right? Because they are hungry for it too. They are ready for men to lead like men were designed to lead, not to overcome and overpower any of us, but again, to step into their roles as protectors and providers so that we can fully step into our role of femininity as well, right? Because it allows us to be able to do that when we trust that someone is an equal partner that's looking out for us. And that is the key, I believe, and being able to really kind of not just restore masculinity across the country, but also be able to help with this epidemic that we have with the abortion industry. You know, they actually will do things to try to keep the man from being involved in any part of the appointment. I think that's something that we probably don't know. I've talked with former abortion workers, and they will tell you that they would crank up the heat in the waiting room so that the men would leave. And then when at the part of the appointment, when they're supposed to go back, they would tell the women, like, I don't know where he went. Well, he went to his car, right? Because he was basically getting baked out of the waiting room, right?
Yeah.
It was Brandon Tatum, the officer Tatum, was telling me that he has heard recently that there are some abortion clinics close to him where they are not even allowing the men to come in, right?
Yeah.
They know they know that having someone and pregnancy centers everywhere will tell you this, that having a supportive man in your life is absolutely a deal maker when it comes to choosing life for your child. So imagine the difference that we can make with just a little bit of change and helping empower and equip young men to step into their roles as fathers and to know the right thing to say, which is not, I'll support you no matter what you choose, right?
Right.
It's, again, I'll walk this out together with you instead of surrendering their rights to their child. I mean, that was another theme that came out of this, Sean. I'll read it verbatim. It says men
Yeah.
feel like abortion is primarily a woman's decision and it's not their right to decide. Now, again, tacit knowledge, this all tells us, yeah, that makes sense. But it doesn't really make sense when we think about it. Like, why have men surrendered their right to what is something that they helped create? Why have we allowed that to happen? Why does culture make them feel like that they don't have they don't have control over the, I mean, in many ways they don't, but because of the way that things are set up against them now, but why do they feel like they can't talk about this issue to be able to say that's my child and I will help you. We'll do this together. That's something that we have to overcome.
Yeah. And how do we overcome that?
I think part of it again is education with young men, and we we have to be respectful of the women still, right? Because and what I'm not saying is that we should move away and just focus all on men. That is not what I'm saying, right? Again,
Right.
complementary, not in competition. This is a both and situation. But we have to talk with young men and help them understand. Again, the DNA is 50% theirs. You know, the old phrase, it takes two, right? Like they know that this is their baby. I mean, you
Yeah.
even the conversations even go around like this is your child, right? Like this is your baby, right? When we're talking about paternity. So we need them to be courageous and to know what to say. But again, Sean, it's bigger than just knowing what to say. Their
Right.
actions have to match their words, right? I say often that if you're um, loudly proclaimed values do not match your actions, then guess what? They're not really your values, right?
Right.
And so it is not enough to teach these young men the right thing to say in order to try to prevent the death of their children. It's not enough, right? It's a good
Right.
start. It's not enough because women won't trust that, right? Oh, yeah, you're just going to tell me what I want to hear, but you're not going to be here in 5 years. You're not going to be here in 5 months, right? We have to help them understand the importance of presence again, of showing up. Doesn't mean you need to be perfect, right? You just need to be there. And I think that that is where we, again, that's the missing piece, is getting men involved in the equation again instead of, I mean, they've just given up. So many young men have just given up, and it's time for all of us to do better. And I think that we've got it's only going to happen with education programs like this, being able to illuminate this so that people think about this differently, that I'll support you no matter what you choose mess. I mean, many people have never even considered that before, just how natural that is, that it rolls off of our tongue. Okay,
Right.
let's reset and figure out how to fix it.
Yeah, I get those comments all the time on social media posts from guys. I assume they're guys. They have pictures of guys and guy names, but that are saying, they say things like, masculinity. When I use the word masculinity, they say things like masculinity means um, supporting whatever. It's always the same thing, supporting whatever she chooses, and I just have to remind them that that agreeing that it's okay for someone, or allowing someone, and that's really what it is, it's allowing someone to kill your child because you don't want to step on their toes, is certainly not masculinity. Like,
No, that's passivity. It's
yes,
not courageous at all.
yes,
Again, it's it's a passive agreeableness that just kind of flies underneath the radar, right? Like it doesn't rock the boat. Well, I mean, take a stand, right? I don't
right,
mean to be argumentative at every turn. That's not what this is about. But for things that are important to you, you should be able to vocalize the way that you think about them, right? And again,
right,
it goes back to men are naturally wired that way. They have an innate desire to provide and protect. And that is something else that came out of this study as well, is that they absolutely that's a reality of something that they have. And so we need to make sure that we we respect that, and that men don't feel like they have to suppress that in any way, that that's unnatural, because that is a natural thing.
yeah, that it's not bad, right? That
Right.
they've been told, many times since kindergarten, when little boys are told sit down, and essentially they're told act like a girl, sit down in a desk and stop jumping around and running around and climbing on things, and all the things that little boys do, and just sit sit in a desk. And we could do an entire podcast on my thoughts on traditional education system, but we won't. But to just oppress their natural um boy urges to move, to do things, and when that's beaten out of you, the boyness is beaten out of you from a young age, and continues to get beaten out of you through through adolescence, and then through young man. And by the time you're a young man, you are hearing that men are not only um the reason that everything is wrong with society, but they're also too stupid to have been the reason that everything is wrong for society, right? Like, men are just bumbling oofs or oafs who somehow also were so smart that they created all these problems in society. And so,
It's kind of mind blowing, isn't it? And also, if you look to Hollywood, look at what we've seen come out of Hollywood, right? Like when you look at sitcoms and all of that, like you look at some of the most popular ones, even ones that I kind of enjoyed along the way,
yeah,
right? It shows the woman as being the decision maker. She's the one who actually gets stuff done, and the men, well, they just kind of, like you said, just kind of bumble around and do their own thing, and do say stupid things and do stupid things and just kind of get away with it. And why are we shocked that that is like that's how men have been portrayed? it is this self-fulfilling prophecy, right, that
Right.
has happened. And so that when you ask how we can fix this again, I think we've got to get to influencers. And I don't
Yeah.
just mean social media influencers. What we do at Vitae is that we have a group of influencers that we are targeting. So we have different areas. So we have pastors. So we have different types of materials that are available for pastors to understand our research and understand the messages to use within their circles of influence. We have the same thing for Christian counselors because, again, many people are struggling with symptoms that look like PTSD from past abortions. And
Yeah.
actually, what I think is super intriguing about your experience is that that's how part of how you got on the road to recovery is because you were in a place that actually wasn't a Christian counselor, but someone who sat in front of you and helped you identify that abortion was part of the trauma that you were dealing with, right? How many
Yeah.
more people can we get to if we help Christian counselors, especially, understand that this could be something to put on their timeline if they see someone who's exhibiting these kind of symptoms? Like, ask them, is this something you've ever encountered before? So we also have some stuff for conservative media. That's a big one. We'll be going to NRB this year to that conference, National Religious Broadcasters Conference, so that we can do more storytelling. Because as I mentioned earlier, part of our strength with this data that we have through our research isn't, again, surveys or polling, but it's people's stories like yours, stories like mine, that help open up people's minds and connect to their hearts. Because this isn't a political issue. As much as people want to politicize it, as much as we have laws that are against it, and trust me, I'm here, thinking about different constitutional amendments that are coming up and want to fight them as well. But for me, it's a heart issue. And if we want
Right.
to change hearts and minds on this issue, then we have to do a good job telling stories. And I don't mean stories of the people that we necessarily did research on, but how do we connect with other influencers and help share, even through conservative media, to sound the alarm on some of the things that we're seeing. And part of that is being able to share stories, but also understand that if we don't have our own pro-life story, because a lot of people will assume, especially about me, because I do have a bunch of older kids at this point, right? And I was a little young when I started, but I didn't have kids through an unexpected pregnancy. I didn't have an abortion experience. I just firmly believe that everyone's human dignity should be respected and revered, right? And so that's how I got started in this movement. So for people out there that are watching, they're like, well, that's great storytelling. I don't have a story. Guess what? When you invest in missions like Sean's and you invest in missions like mine at Vitae Foundation, you have all the credibility you need to share our stories, to share the stories that you hear within the pro-life movement, because you are investing in these stories. They belong to you too. All of these stories belong to us, and we need to share them so that we can help other people understand why we should be respecting life and why abortion is so dangerous and why we need young men to step into their roles as fathers, and how that is how we're going to overcome this abortion mess that we have on our hands today.
Uh, okay. So I don't want to move past that because I agree with everything you just said, and I think that I'm very clear that while laws need to be changed, culture is where my heart is, right? Because if we can change the men and raise up good men, speaking from my perspective at Men for Life, that is my focus, and raise up good men, then we can change the culture. And in changing the culture, I believe that is how we will end abortion. Because people say all the time, well, you can make it illegal and people will just do it illegally. And whether or not that is as true before the abortion pill as it is now, I doubt. But now, 100%, 22 states have shield laws, that protect providers who sell the abortion pill and ship them across state lines. So they're already creating laws to allow the illegal transport and sale of these pills. We know that they are giving to people without any ultrasounds, without knowing gestational age. In some cases, we have a mutual friend who ordered under the abortion pill through text messaging, letting them know that she was 13 to 14 weeks. she's not, but this is the story she told them, that she was
Mm.
13 to 14 weeks pregnant, and it's only indicated for 10 to 11, but by the time it got there, she'd be 15 as far as they knew. That is a danger not only to the child but also to the mom. And so yes, people will do it illegally. If it is made illegal, we have to change the culture, because until we change the culture, that's what's going to happen. And so I think that's really where it's important. And I know that that's what you guys are doing as well. I know this is all fresh. Like, you guys met, Vitae Foundation met, I think Monday,
Right.
if I'm correct,
Yeah.
to discuss the findings of this. But with what you know now, what would you say is the biggest takeaway from the study, and how will that impact what you do with that information moving forward?
Okay, so the way this works for us is that we have different stages of the research. So you're right. We did just share this at our internal staff meeting so that we could start equipping all of our staff members to start speaking about it within their own circles of influence. And now what we do is we have what's called a research application department. And so they take the research themes and findings and they start crafting messaging and start testing it. We test it in different groups, one of which is our alpha centers. So we have pregnancy centers around the country that we exclusively do their marketing, their messaging for. So we will use what we develop to create some test messaging to run with those centers. And then we take those findings and we put them in what's called Vitae Vault, which is made exclusively for pregnancy centers around the country at no cost to them. So they can see, oh, wow, this message really took off over at this center. Let's give it a shot here, right? And so again, at no cost, that's made available. So that's one of the ways that we'll be doing it. We also do sports marketing campaigns. So we'll be taking those messages and creating some ads with them that we'll be running and seeing how those perform as well. This study is so different because a lot of our stuff that's led up to this, we've done stuff with the general public, again, that had some men involved in it and women. And we've done stuff that's been exclusively for women that we use with the pregnancy centers. This one is different because it's men. And so we know that not all pregnancy centers have men's programs, which if they don't, you should contact Sean. But and there's your plug, Sean. You can follow up on it a little bit if you want. Yeah.
That's going to be the only thing I cut into a reel.
Just kidding. Do it. But you have that as an asset to be able to use as well. But we're going to start looking into other ways to be able to get this into the hands of the influencers I was talking about earlier, to see how we can work together with the churches, right? The pastors that I was mentioning, talking with the Christian counselors as well, with the men that they see. We're going to have to roll up our sleeves and get creative, because we do know that this is part of the winning solution. And again, if it wasn't, then why would the abortion industry fight so hard to remove men from the equation, right? Why would they be so adamant about coming by yourself and not bringing him along and not having him come back at least for part of the appointment, right? And like I said, the silly things they do to crank up the heat in the waiting room, and just how obnoxious and hard they make it for men to be involved, right? Telling them, my body, my choice, you don't get a say. Why would they do that? Right? If men were not part of the answer, why would they do that? So knowing that,
the only reason that the opposition is so hard on men in this is because they are scared of what happens when men are involved, which gets to the reason for your messaging, for your study and your messaging, and it gets to the reason for what I'm doing. Because once we empower men to be involved, and it just comes down to what you've said so many times, presence, to just be present. Like what Brandon Tatum told you, is a story that I've heard many times, that they don't even let the guys in the building, because the presence of the man, is significant. And so that really is what it gets into.
That's right. So we're going to be doing a lot of work on our end to keep moving that out. And if people want to support this work, I would encourage them to go to vitaefoundation.org. It's VITAE Foundation.org. And for some of you out there that are like, what is Vitae? What does that even mean? It's Latin for life. All right. That's how we got our name. We've been around about 30 years, 34, I think, to be exact. And we actually got our start. If anybody's familiar with Silver Dollar City that's in Branson, or even Dollywood that's out in Tennessee, the guy who founded that, his name is Peter Hershend. And when we went to Peter all these years ago with some ideas, he said, you know what? I think you can do better. And he basically, back in those days, right, back in the 1900s, he slid. This is before my time, though. I think I was still a kid. I'm at least that's what I'm going with, right? He slid this VHS tape back to our founder and said, you can do better, but I'm going to connect you with someone who I think can help. And that was Dr. Charles Kinney that I mentioned earlier, that is the founder and absolutely the man who is so brilliant with right brain research. And that is how we got here today, is by someone who believed in us, right? But also saw the importance that makes us so different in the work that we do. And so if you are out there and also seeing that as being valuable, come along and at least follow us along for this journey, right? Sign up for our newsletters so that you can see, I mean, Sean was a part of our advisory committee, but we have a long list of guys that we had. Archbishop Nallman from the Kansas City, Kansas diocese, or archdiocese. He's actually Archbishop Emeritus now. We also had Seth Dillon with the Babylon Bee that was a part of it as well, and a list of other men that you would probably recognize that have been a part of this movement. Colonel Allen West is also on that list. A lot of
I would
men.
go so far as to say they will recognize every name on there except mine.
Oh, well, they have to recognize yours, Sean, because they're watching your show.
That's right. Except
no,
for that.
No. It's men that are making an impact on this issue, right? That are invested. And so when you're asking what we're going to do next, well, part of what we were doing with having these men be involved in this study, I mean, Jarrell Gotze from Heartbeat International as well, is that we're taking this message back to them and saying, okay, how can we work together? Because I do believe collaboration is essential in this movement, right? And so we're building bridges to take the message back to within their circles of influence, because these are men. You guys have an audience, you have a following, you have a calling, more importantly. And how can we connect what we are finding out with your calling and within the people that you can reach on a regular basis? That is the power, the positive power of social conformity. Let's use it for the good.
That's right. Before we close out, I just want to, you brought it up earlier, but you didn't go into detail. And I'd like for you to share something that you've been talking about lately about being on the fence. And then I'm going to contrast that with something else we talked about earlier.
Absolutely. Okay. So we see it happen all the time, that there are certain issues that sometimes feel a little gray to us, and we'll ride the fence. We will distance ourselves from them. We will justify everything in our head, but make no mistake about it, they position us right on the fence, right? Within the abortion issue, a lot of times people will say, I personally wouldn't choose abortion, but I don't want to make that decision for someone else. And unfortunately, that positions you on the fence. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I heard something not too long ago and it has stuck with me. Guys, the fence, well, it belongs to Satan. And so if we are allowing ourselves to ride the fence on issues, then whose team are we aligning ourselves with? And I think that's something we have to remember and take very seriously.
Yeah. And I think that, I really like that visual because, using the biblical context, we are called to stand for something. We're not only called to stand for something. We are told what it is that we are called to stand for. And, and it's clear that people mix up the messaging of Jesus Christ so much, and take it to the extreme of the only commandment that matters is the 11th commandment, love your neighbor as yourself. And the issue is that, you can look to, and I read it this morning and don't remember which book it's in, but at least one of the letters of Paul where he says that is the most important commandment because all the other commandments, and then he lists them, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not commit adultery, um, fall under that because you would not someone to do that to you. Therefore, if you are following that 11th commandment, you will not do it to them. And so it's not that the 11th commandment comes and just does away with the first 10 commandments, right? It's that the 11th commandment is how we apply the first 10 commandments. In fact, Jesus said, I did not come to do away with the law, I came to fulfill the law. And so I think that's really important, that Jesus tells us that the Bible tells us that we are to stand for something. And when you're on the fence, you're standing for nothing. You're just waiting to see what happens, right? And then you can choose the winning side, is really what being on the fence is about. And someone who doesn't stand for anything and is just waiting to see what's happened and is going to choose the other side is living for the world, because the world will decide which side wins. And so the world is of Satan, right? And so that is really a great visual of, that the fence belongs to Satan. And to contrast that with another visual from earlier, of the man being the protector, the provider, being in that watchtower, getting off the fence, which is nothing, but being on that watchtower, making sure that everyone in their charge is taken care of. It's that dominion instead of domination, right? Creating an environment in which everyone under you, or who trusts you, can trust you because they know they will be taken care of. And that's dominion versus toxic masculinity, which is domination. And so I like those two visuals. I like the idea of, that the fence is not where you want to be. You want to be in the watchtower, especially if you're a man. You want to be on the front lines, right? You want to do something. And I think that's where you brought up that passivity is the opposite of masculinity. And I think that you're right. I think that masculinity means taking action and doing something. You can't take action if you don't stand for something. And I appreciate you sharing everything that you shared today, especially knowing that we did this once yesterday. I feel way better about this. And
Yeah, this one's golden. I mean, we might even have to come back and do another round just because, right? Because we
yeah,
need to continue building this out, right? We'll see
that's right.
we'll see how everybody responds to it too. And if you guys have additional questions to be able to toss our way, like maybe that will give us some inspiration on what we should cover next time.
Yeah, for sure. And just to remind everybody, the website is vitaefoundation.org. I will put that in the description, and I'll also link the Instagram, the social media handles as well, which are just Vitae Foundation, right?
Right, right.
Okay.
Come find
All
us.
right. Brandy Meeks, thank you so much for sharing today. I appreciate you, and I look forward to seeing you again in person soon.
Thank you. Sounds great. Appreciate you all.